So this is the first unit of the second exam. And I always warn my students of this, and I want to make it clear to all of you as well, that exam two is going to be a little more challenging than exam one for two reasons. Number one is that there's 4 chapters in this unit instead of 3. The way the course is broken up, there was just a weird number of chapters that we needed to cover. And it just so happens that this one unit, the second exam unit, just has more pieces to it. So it just has 4 chapters instead of 3. It's the only test that does that. The second reason why it's more challenging is because there's more just content. So on the first exam, there were questions pertaining to the history of social psych. Well, those are, there's clear fact. It's hard to write exam questions that make you apply that knowledge to other situations. But what you saw in the first exam was there's in the social cognition area, there was a lot of application questions. Well, you should expect more of those types of questions than you did for the. You should expect more of those here on the second exam just because the content lends itself more towards that. So that just means you really have to know the topics, the material a little bit better. All right. So what we're going to talk about today, basically, in this unit is going to be, it's called nonverbal behaviors. However, I like to talk about it in terms of attributions, and that's going to be the main thing we talk about is attributions. Now, we're going to define an attribution formally in a little bit, but I want to present you with a scenario here. Let's say that you are, hanging out in your dorm room or whatever, and you get an email from your professor. And the email says, "We need to meet at your earliest convenience." That's what the words say. That's all it says. How many of you would attribute what your professor said in that email to something, let's say, hostile? Like, how many people would say, "Oh my gosh, they're mad at me. I have to go. I have to go now." Right? That's what I did. My advisor in graduate school, he was a very intimidating man to work with. And he sent me an email once that said, "Chris, I have this data question. I need to know something. Please come up to my office." I was like, "Oh my God, he's mad at me. I screwed up. I did something bad." Because I made an attribution about his email. It was just words, but I said I inferred some sort of emotion or intent to his words. And I just straight up, I remember my office was on the second floor of one building. I ran down the stairs, ran across this parking lot where his building was, ran up 4 flights of stairs to his office. I was all out of shape. I was like, "What do you need?" And he's like, "Nothing. Like, everything okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, you sent this email. I'm out of breath because I just ran. What's going on?" He goes, "I just had this question. Did you send this email to me with the data file in it?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Okay, that's all I needed." So what we do, so he wasn't mad. That's the funny thing. He wasn't mad, but the attributions that we made about his intent via that email were such that you got to imagine that what we do is we get our social information about what attributions we make from the environment, and that's where nonverbal behaviors come in. So even though we're going to start by talking about nonverbal behavior, the bigger goal is to focus on attributions. All right, so what we do in attributions is we make judgments about people. And these judgments can be based on a lot of different types of things. For example, emotions. And so there are, research has identified 6 basic emotions. All right. I'm just going to put them up here real quick so you can all see them. They're joy, fear, anger, surprise, disgust, and sadness. Now, if you've ever seen the movie, oh gosh, I'm blanking on the movie. Crap. The movie with the 5 emotions that live in Riley's head. It's gonna bother me. I'm gonna think of it later. I'm sure of it. The sad part is I own this movie. What you'll see is that a lot of these emotions are the same as those in the movie. I'm Googling it right now. It's going to bother me if I don't do this. Inside Out. Oh, thank God. All right, so the movie Inside Out. What you'll see is that five of the six emotions are depicted in that movie. All right, so if you've ever seen that movie, studying for this will be really easy. The only one that's not in there is surprise. Surprise was not in the movie. Ironically, and I kind of read some interviews about Inside Out. Surprise was supposed to be another character, but they wrote this character out because it didn't apparently add anything. All right, so these are the six basic emotions. Now, there are three reasons why these emotions are basic. So the word basic is important here. Number one is that these emotions can be detected in the face. So all you have to do is show a face to someone, and you can tell what emotion they're experiencing. All right. So if you look at these different pictures here, you have to think about what makes these photos different in terms of detecting faces. And what research has identified are three key pieces of the face that differentiate different emotions from each other. The first is going to be the eyes. So let's just focus on this joy. Look at those eyes, okay? Versus, let's say, surprise. What you'll see is that some eyes are open, some eyes are closed. All right, and then if you look at, but however, it's not just the eyes that tell you that, because if you look at, let's say, joy versus sadness and disgust, all three of those eyes are closed. They're all the same, right? At least conceptually, they're the same. So the one is the eyes. So I'm gonna eyes. Number two is the brow. So if you look at the brow, what we mean by the brow is this area here, including the eyebrows. All right. So what you see here is that for surprise, the eyebrows are raised, and you see this little wrinkle right here in the forehead. Well, you also see that here, wrinkle in the forehead, but the eyebrows are down. So that's the brow area. What's interesting is when you look at things like disgust and anger, you see the brow kind of pointing down like this. But and these are kind of wiggly, right? And this one doesn't really have any characteristic whatsoever. So the second is the brow. Brow. Sorry if you can't see that R very well. And the final, sorry, the final one is the mouth. All right. So if you look at the mouth, sometimes the mouth is closed. Sometimes the mouth is, so this would also be closed. Sometimes the mouth is open, like these. All right. And you can kind of tell, and by closed mouth, I mean you can see in it. So if you look at this, you see the teeth are kind of blocking it. The teeth are blocking it. So you have closed versus open. So what you do is to identify these emotions, what you do is you look at all these characteristics together. So you need all three pieces to detect it. But what's cool about this is once you get these things dealt with, all right, once you get these things dealt with and you identify the pieces of the face, you can identify someone's emotions. So all of us have the ability to kind of read someone's face when they walk in the room. And by reading someone's face when you walk into the room, you can kind of tell what mood they're in. And guess what? If someone walks in and they look angry, you're probably not going to approach them versus someone who walks in and they're joyful, right? So we detect it from our social environment, what other people are looking like, and that's going to predict our behavior, which is, do we approach them, do we talk to them or not, or how do we handle them? What's interesting is that research has shown that some certain developmental learning disability-like type of disorders kind of play a role in this. So, for example, autistic children have a hard time detecting emotions and also displaying emotions, right? So autistic children aren't very good at this. But needless to say, they start to get good at this. So my son, my older son, he's 4.5. He, at daycare, they practice this. They have a sheet with different faces, and they practice their emotions. And whenever someone does something to a kid, right, let's say one kid at the daycare room takes a toy from the other, the teachers will pull that kid aside, the one who took the toy, and say, how would that make someone feel? And they point at this little board, and they would say, oh, that would make them feel sad or angry or whatever. And they say, now what would happen if you gave them a hug and said sorry? It's like, oh, they would feel joy or happiness. All right, and that's exactly how these things play out. So these are learned very early. So one of the reasons why they are basic is because, once again, they are detected in the face. And that's going to lead us to the second component, which makes this a basic emotion. And the second component is that these emotions can be detected and displayed across all the world. So what's cool about that is no matter what language you speak, a smile in the US is still a smile in Saudi Arabia, is still a smile in Laos, is still a smile in Russia. Right? So all over the world, we know that a smile means happiness. All right. So what's cool about that is, once again, no matter what language you speak, this is kind of the universal language. These 6 basic emotions are like the universal language. If you are ever if you're ever in a room with someone who doesn't speak your native language, you can easily convey how you feel about something based on the emotions in your face. All right. Now the final reason, so let's go over the 3. Number 1 is that they can be detected in the face. Number 2 is that they're known universally, and the final one that we haven't talked about yet is that you can detect it in babies. All right. Now I'm not talking like fresh out of the oven babies. Fresh out of the oven babies don't have the cognitive ability to control any part of their body. If you've ever dealt with a little baby, like a day old, 2 days old, they just kind of flail their arms and their legs, and their facial features are weird because they are just kind of all over the place. But when they get, I think it's like around, I'm talking about my kids, I think they were about 3 months, they can really start to display emotions on purpose. All right. So this is my favorite lecture because we're going to play a game, and that game is going to be Guess the Emotions of My Son. So this is my son Eric when he was a little baby. He's 4.5 now. I love his shirt, by the way. It says I'm a player, and it's got a So this is my son. He's 4.5 now, but this is him when he was a baby. This is when we first moved to Gettysburg. He was about 3 weeks old. So this is him at about 3 months. And I wanted to show this face because this is his neutral face. All right. So he's displaying no emotion whatsoever. He's just kind of hanging out, chilling. All right. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you different pictures, and you're going to try to detect what emotion he is displaying. So let's look at this one. All right. So guess what emotion he's displaying here? Well, everyone knows it's sadness, right? And it's sadness because, and when you know that, because of the 3 characteristics. Number 1 is you look at his brow, it's kind of furrowed, his eyes are really big, and his mouth is closed, and you can see his lip come out. It's really sad. And so that's sadness. All right. And we can detect that very easily, and babies display it. All right. This one. Once again, his shirts are perfect. His shirt, if you can't see it, says, I love daddy, and I'm holding him, and he's clearly not loving me. So one thing about babies is that this is anger. Notice how, unlike the previous one, his eyes are closed. His brow is furrowed, kind of like that. All right. Now, his mouth is open. Adults, when we're angry, our mouth stays closed. When babies are angry, they cry. Hence, his mouth is open. He didn't like hats. All right. He doesn't like hats. But needless to say, it's pretty... a lot of people, when I showed him this, they actually thought that this was sadness because of the mouth. And I told them that that's not the case for babies, but it is for adults, that when they're angry, babies have their mouth open and because they're crying. All right. And obviously everyone can tell this is happiness. Now notice how the eyes are open just like it was in sadness, but look at the brow. There's really no furrowing or wrinkling whatsoever, and you can obviously see his mouth is open. He's making a smiley face. I was in the grocery store to give my wife a break. He was a very difficult baby. And this was the first smile I ever got. So, of course, I whipped out my phone and took pictures. I said, oh, Mom's going to make nachos tonight. And apparently he liked the word nachos. So there you go. He's a boy after my own heart. So, what we have here is different emotions detected by the faces in babies. All right. And I want you to look at this real quick. And if you just take a gander, you can tell all 6 basic emotions. I don't know who these babies are. These are off the internet. But needless to say, you can detect emotions in babies. And that's one of the 3 factors that make it universal. Hence basic.